Guys, let's go to page 68 and 69. Thank you, Justin. Jason, not Justin, Jason. And don't let me forget, I'm going to give you the answers to your second quiz, but let's go ahead and do this lecture first. Guys, we're going to talk about legal description for real estate. Legal description of your real property. Why is a legal description important? To know what you own. Okay, give me some more. Why would it? Well, know what you own because wouldn't a buyer want to know what they're buying, right? And
Exactly.
so, and what?
It's the exact, it is what it is.
An exact description, a formal, specific description, a legal description on your real estate, specifically. In North Carolina, there are 3 ways that we use to describe real estate legally. And so on the bottom of page 69, the first way is called meets and bounds. Now, meets and bounds is a very wordy description. It's an old description. It's probably the very most common description in North Carolina because North Carolina was one of the original colony states. And so meets and bounds is quite wordy, and if you'll look at some of the things that will give you a clue that it's a meets and bounds. First of all, it has to have a beginning start place, and that's called the point of beginning. This description will go clockwise or counterclockwise. It uses degrees and feet and compass directions. Now, if you look at your bottom paragraph, it's telling you that when it's going clockwise or counterclockwise by referencing linear measurements, compass directions, that's referred to as calls. Each call gives a distance, that's the meets, and each direction is the bounds. So the distance is the meets part, the direction is the bounds part. And so, and knowing the compass direction, you would have to know because the direction is going to say go east or go west or go north or go south, X amount of feet or X or the degrees of that description. Go with me over to page 70, and if you look at your illustration 4.1, this is a meets and bounds illustration. And right above that illustration is the description. So if you read the description, it says beginning at the intersection of the east line. So east would be to the right, wouldn't it? It said the east line of Jones Road and the south line of Skull Drive. And so you start there where that star is, and that's the point of beginning. Then it says go a certain amount of degrees and go along the south line 200 feet. So you're south of Skull and you're going 200 feet. And it says to the east. And then it's saying go 216.5 down south, southeast. It kind of goes right there. And then it's saying go back west. And then we're going to go north up to where the point of beginning started. And so when you have a meets and bounds description, it has to conclude somewhere, and it concludes at the point of beginning. What I was telling my class this morning is the description has to close up. So I think it could be a little confusing to you if you had a question, where does the meets and bounds legal description close? It's not called a point of closure. It closes at the point of beginning. So it goes back around to where it started from. So you start at the point of beginning and the description finishes at the point of beginning. Does that make sense? Meets and bounds, everybody, references monuments or natural markers. You could read in a test question, this description is referencing an artificial marker. What does artificial mean?
Not natural.
Not natural. So what's another word? A landmark. Another word would be man-made. Artificial would be not natural, which makes sense, and it's man-made, like a landmark or a sign or a fence. So if you see the terminology artificial marker, don't let that throw you. It's just not a natural, it's not like a tree. It's not like a stone or a big rock, because sometimes these descriptions do use natural markers, and the description might say, go 150 feet to that big oak tree. Now, surveyor will go out and establish it, of course, pinpointedly with the degrees and the exact distance and the iron stake in the ground, but it might say something like that. Now, this is important to you as a real estate agent this way. When we fill out an offer to purchase, a sales contract form, buyer wants to make an offer, we do have to fill in the legal description. Now, the way to find the legal description, probably the easiest way, would go online and look at the deed. The deed would have the pinpointed legal description in it. Guys, that's why we're talking about this unit now, because tomorrow night the lecture is going to be about deeds. And one of the things you have to have for a deed is a legal description. And so if we were looking for the legal description, we could pull the deed up online, and there would be the legal description all spelled out in that deed. A pinpointed specific description. If the description is meets and bounds, it's awfully wordy. The Real Estate Commission says we need to copy things with care if we're filling in the blanks on an offer to purchase. They even say probably you don't want to type up a meets and bounds description, because it's so wordy it could lead to a typo. You could be reading it and your eyes could skip down and you could miss a line, or you can have it transposed. So typing in an offer to purchase a full-blown meets and bounds description is not what you're going to do. Well, another way that property can be located or described in North Carolina is referencing where it is in the Register of Deeds. For example, you could say this is a meets and bounds description. You can find it in deed book number and page number. And so the lawyer who's searching the title will go to that deed book and find the page, and on that deed will be the full-blown legal description. So that would be way safer as a real estate agent filling in the blanks of an offer. It is meets and bounds, but you can find it on this deed book number and page number. So referencing another place where the legal description can be found is an okay way to describe the property as well. And so that's two ways, meets and bounds, and referencing to another document that's already on record. That would be an okay way in North Carolina to legally describe property. The other way in North Carolina, if you'll go to page 74, is the plat, the recorded plat. And so the recorded plat is going to have lot number and block number. And if you look on page 75, you see a plat right there. A plat is like a layout or a map of the development. And so you can see it's nice and neat looking. The lots are all numbered. It's got some of the easements and the street names, the lot size, the blocks. It's in the county of the description says it's in this particular county. And so it's a pretty straightforward legal description for urban areas. If you're asked, however, probably what's the most common legal description in North Carolina, it's going to be meets and bounds. That's the most common. So if you look at the bottom of page 75 and your second to last paragraph, that's the plat description. All of lot number 41, and it's giving me a little more information, plan of Bradford Extension, map book and page number, so that's where you'll see it, Register of Deeds in Craven County. All that would be required for a full legal description. So the legal description, everybody, is formal. It's the kind of description you would have on deeds and documents that are transferring title. If you go out to meet an owner of a property to put their house on the market, the listing agreement does have a place you can put the legal description, but also a street address would be okay too, because that's an informal document in a way compared to a deed. A deed is a document that you're transferring ownership. You've got to have the full blown pinpointed legal description. So the plat book and page is a viable legal description in North Carolina. I do want to tell you a few things about the plat though. This will come up in your reading in Unit 6, but let me go ahead and mention it to you. A developer cannot sell any of these lots in this development until the final plat is approved. So in other words, the developer would have to go through the approval process at the city council or the county commissioners or whoever in the area will approve these plans. So they go through the approval process, and it might take a couple of times going through. For example, they could present this to the commissioners, and the commissioners might say, you need to tweak this, you need to go back and do this, and they might even give you preliminary approval. But that's not full approval. So you've got to have the final plat approval, and that plat must be recorded because it creates the legal description. So let me say it another way. As a real estate agent, it would be important if you went out to a new development. Let's just say the developer's breaking ground and it's brand new development. You shouldn't even, and they shouldn't accept any offer to purchase on a property that doesn't have at least the preliminary plat approval. Because what are you selling? There's not a legal description. There's not a specific parcel that you're selling. So developers can take offers, and they can take these offers and contracts if they've got the preliminary plat approval. They can even take down payment. If they don't have the preliminary plat approval, all they can do is take your name and number and call you when the plat is approved. They cannot take a lot reserve, because what are you reserving? Are you following me? If there's not a pinpointed legal description, they can't take a lot reserve. But they can say, well, Jason wants us to call him when we get this plat at least preliminarily approved, and have Jason's number and name, and we'll contact him then. Cannot take any monies on if you don't have preliminary plat approval.
What's the timing once this preliminary plat approval happens, or a final approval before they can, it has to just be final, and then immediately the next day they can take money?
As long as it's recorded. No, they can take money while it's preliminarily approved. They can take, a buyer can make an offer or a lot reserve, and they can take money if it's preliminarily approved.
Okay.
They cannot go to closing unless it's finally approved. So we call that, you can't really sell the property, which means you can't transfer the title over until there's the final plat approval, because the final plat approval is the legal description.
And is there a period of days where that has to be on record before you can do that, or are you doing?
Not that I'm aware of. No, once it's approved and recorded, you've got your legal description. Now the process, I don't know how long that would take. It all depends, wouldn't it, on how far along the developer was. But this does come up in your Unit 6, so when you're getting ready for tomorrow night, you'll see that again. And guys, that's a testing area. Because that's real life real estate. You need to know it where, if you're looking at new area, newly developed, you need to know, because a lot of times, I can remember anyways, when a developer is just breaking ground, or maybe he's got some things started, they might have a trailer on the site, and if you go in there, they might have the map, tacked on the wall. And you should be able to see, has it got the preliminary approval, or has there been a final approval? And if you don't see it, you just ask, because you really don't want to be writing any offers up on something that you don't have a legal description for. That just wouldn't be the thing to do. Alrighty, go back with me, if you will, to page 69. On page 69, second to last paragraph, there are three basic ways to describe property in the United States. One is meets and bounds, and we know that North Carolina uses that a bunch. The other is called the rectangular, sometimes called the government survey method, and North Carolina does not use that one. And then the other one is referencing a plat, a lot, and a block. Now, the government survey method, guys, this is really an interesting history story. If you wanted to Google it and ask and find out about it, it was developed in, I think, 1785, and I believe Thomas Jefferson developed this for the government. So it was developed as a way to describe property west of the Mississippi. So if you go flying on, if you on an airplane and you fly out that way and you look out your window, you see rectangular shaped properties. When you come back this way, you don't see the rectangles. It's just a different way that property is described in different parts of the country. But the rectangular method came about in the late 1700s, and it was a time when the government, newly formed government, and the government actually gave land away, or they either sold it for real cheap. There's a movie that gives you a little idea of this. Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. I think the movie was called Far and Away, or Far and Beyond, or Far, something like that. And it was the settlers, like in cowboy days, and they were given, the men were on horseback, and they would say, they'd give them like a stake, and they say, go, and they'd go flying down on their horses and staking out the land that they wanted, laying claim to the property that they wanted. I know most of you are too young for this, but have you ever heard that little song, Home, Home on the Range? Guys, it's ranges out there. That's kind of a term under the rectangular method. Have you ever heard somebody say, now my day class said, no, we never heard of that. Have you ever heard anybody say, like on a TV show, like a Western, where they say, we got to go and check the back 40? I mean, the back 40 symbolizes 40 acres. And so, it's really interesting how this was back in that part of time. So let's talk about the rectangular survey method. When you looked over, for example, on page 71, I don't know what your first reaction was to reading over this next few pages. Tell me, what was your reaction? Because it's about 3 pages talking about the rectangular survey method. Now, we do have a national part of the exam. This is not used in North Carolina. You could see a question under the national part of the exam. I can tell you it won't be a real complicated question, but there's some things that we need to know. But I kept talking and didn't get you to answer. But what did you think when you first read this part? I agree. This rectangle method has not always been in the textbook that we teach from. In fact, I think we've only been teaching it about 2 years. And I can remember when we got the revised edition of this textbook, and when the commission on the syllabus, when we were told that we needed to start teaching this because there may be test questions on it, it was because we've gone to a national kind of test. I looked at it and here's what I said. Are you kidding me? There's no way I can explain this, because it intimidated me. I'll be honest. I read it a lot before I felt comfortable with it. And so I'm going to break it down just easy peasy for us, because I don't think we need to get too overboard involved in it. Now, if you are interested, you can Google, because it is a pretty interesting time in history. So let's start on page 71. And we're going to talk about some terms here. The first illustration, 4.2, you see the township lines. Now, first of all, the baseline, the base is horizontal. In this description, there has to be a principal meridian, and there X a number of meridians. They said 37 meridians, but that doesn't really matter to us, but it runs perpendicular to the baseline. The township lines run horizontal, so they run parallel to the baseline. In between each township line is 6 miles wide, so that's important to remember. In between each one of those township lines is 6 miles. Now look at the bottom illustration, page 4, figure 4.3. Now we're seeing the range lines running perpendicular or vertical. And so they run on either side of the meridian. Those range lines are 6 miles apart also. So the township lines are 6 miles apart. The vertical range lines are 6 miles apart. Go with me over to the next page. If you look at your illustration, 4.4, now the range lines and the township lines intersect. You see the gray shaded area? That's called a township, everybody. And that township is 6 miles square. Does it make sense that it's 6 miles square? If there's 6 miles between the vertical lines and there's 6 miles between the horizontal lines, that township is 6 miles square. Okay? Now, look at the top of 73. This is a township. You see your north, your west, your south, and your east. So what I would take from this is each township has 36 sections. So each township, there are 36 numbers there, aren't there? There are 36 sections. Now, if we visualize that as range lines and township lines, they're 6 miles apart, right? That whole township is. But look at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's 6 miles going that way, 6, 7 all the way down to number 31. That's 6 miles. 31 over to 36 is 6 miles. And 1 going up to number 1 is 6 miles. So what that's telling me is each one of those numbers is 1 mile square. So section 1 is 1 mile square. Section 2, 1 mile square. 3, 4, 5, every one of those sections is 1 mile square because of the 6 by 6. So a section, we said, is 1 mile square. So I would remember, you may need it later on, but a mile is 5280 linear feet. So if it's a mile square, it means it's 5280 by 5280. Take your calculator out just about 1 or 2 more times tonight. Put 5280 in your calculator, and I promise you, you won't have to ever do this again. I just want to show you something. 5280 multiply times 5280. Did you get a big number? Something like 2, yeah, a whole big number. Now, let's remember this. How many square feet are in 1 acre? 43,560. Divide that big number by 43,560. And you got 640, didn't you? That was in your reading. Every section has 640 acres. I would remember that. Each section in that township has 640 acres, and the reason is because it's 1 mile square. And 1 mile by 1 mile, when we multiplied it out and divided by the square footage in 1 acre, it tells us 640 acres. Everybody good? Alrighty, another thing, look at the bottom of page 72. I would probably read over this very important point paragraph because it's telling you all about the sections. And it says that these sections can be broken down into halves, they can be broken down into quarters. The halves and the quarters can be broken down. In other words, it doesn't mean everybody owns 640 acres. It could be less than that and probably is. Now, when you look at the township at the top of 73, that shaded number 16, it says in your reading that's reserved for school, school activities and school things. So that would be reserved, and it looks like it's pretty centered for everybody. Just imagine the settlers traveling to get there. Now, the numbers, these sections are numbered northeast to northwest, and then it drops down and goes back northeast. So if you look at your township and you see the one, we're going, starting on the east and we're going west until we hit 6, because it's 6 miles across. Then we drop down to 7 and go back east. Drop down, then go back west. It's really kind of how the settlers plowed their land. And if you've ever mowed yards, I used to when I was little, I'd go that way, come back this way, go back that way, and that's the way that the townships are numbered. So you could have a question like, which section is north of section 15? And you just look north of that, it's 10, right? And so that's pretty straightforward. I do want to show you this illustration on the bottom of 73. I want to show you how we can locate a particular property. So let's say I've got my section here. And I know this whole section has 640 acres. I know this is north, west, east, and south. Now I want to show you, and this is pretty fun when you think about it. Let me give you a legal description, and it would look like this. Okay, so there's the legal description. Southeast of southeast 1/4 of the southeast 1/4 of the southeast 1/4. The comma stands for of, and you can even say it means out of. When you're locating a property, let's locate this, you start at the northeast corner because we're going northeast to northwest. So we start at the back if we're trying to find this location. This tells me to divide this section into quarters. It says go to the southeast 1/4. So that tells me I'm breaking it down into quarters, and the southeast 1/4 is right here, isn't it? Is everybody good? And so we're starting here. We go forward to the next direction. It says, and the southeast 1/4 out of that southeast 1/4. So we started here, and it tells us to break it down into fourths again. And we're right here now. We're in that southeast 1/4. So now we're right here. Is everybody with me? Sort of? Southeast 1/4 of that southeast 1/4. So we're breaking it down again, and the property, that description is right there. So you start at the end, and you keep moving forward, and this is big to the 1/4, and then you're going in one more fourth, and then you're going in one more fourth. So the directions tell you, is it going to be a fourth or a half or whatever it is going to be. Let me show you how to figure out the acreage in that. And so there's a shortcut math example in your book. If I want to know how many acres that is, I'm going to do this because it's quick. I'm going to multiply my denominators, and that gives me 64. I know there's 640 acres in that whole section, and this number I've got is 64, divided into that, and it gives me 10. So I know that little shaded part is 10 acres. Just doing a math shortcut. Now let me show you another way you could do the math. It might make a little more sense to you, I've got an instructor who likes to do it this way. 1/4 of 640 is how much? 1/4 of 640 is 160, isn't it? 1/4 of 160 is 40, and 1/4 of 40 is 10. So you can do it that way, literally. That didn't take too long either. I just like the shortest cut. And so 4 times 4 times 4, now you would have to be careful, it's not 64 acres. You have to remember to divide that into 640. Everybody okay?
64 would be an answer. So you-
Don't have that there, because that's what you're gonna get in your calculator first, isn't it? Let me put up another legal description, and I want you to draw it and see if you can find it. So here's what I'm gonna put. I'll write it down, and then you see if you can find it. Okay. Okay, there's the description. South 1/2 of the northwest 1/4 of the southeast 1/4. Is anybody stuck? Y'all are either really quick or you're really tired and sleepy. What's,
Depends whether I got it right or not.
oh, okay.
Right.
Well, tell me what to do, Elizabeth. What do I do first?
I cut it into 4,
Cut it into fours.
and I think you're in the bottom, you're in the, so cut that next one, the bottom one into 4.
Well, here we are first, right?
Right, so I'm there, now put that one into 4,
Now do that one into 4.
please. Now I think you're in the top quadrant of that one. That one, you have to cut that one in half through the middle,
Which middle?
horizontally,
Okay,
and then you're in the bottom.
there you go. Everybody find that? No? Where'd you get stuck? Really try to, here's what I want you to think. I'm starting big with one big rectangle, and I'm gonna look at what they tell me to divide it into. Divide it into 4s. Once you divide it into 4s, the next step says divide that 1/4 into 4s again. And then whatever this says. So you start big and you're going smaller. So we started big, and this is the first southeast, 1/4. And then we're staying here because we're going smaller and smaller. And then we divided that into 1/4. And it said we wanted the northwest. So that northwest 1/4. And then to finish it up, it said the southern half of that. So you're just starting really big and going little. Let me show you one more. Let me mention one more thing. I said the comma means you keep going, right? Who's that? Oh, Beard. The comma means you keep going. Well, there also is a semicolon, and it tells you to do something else. So let me put a description up here, and we'll do it. All righty. Northeast 1/4 of the southwest 1/4, semicolon, north 1/2, and northwest 1/4, and southeast 1/4. All right. That's a pretty long description, but we're gonna do it the same way we did before. The only difference is you're gonna start northeast and keep going. When you see a semicolon, it means you stop and start again, because that semicolon means and. So they own this portion and they own that portion. So when you see a semicolon, just stop. So, you want to give it a try for a minute, see if you can find it? Just take a minute and see what you can do. Ooh, that's not a good rectangle. That's a bad rectangle. Start at the back and go forward, stop, and then start again. Hunter, you got it?
Nope.
No?
Ma'am.
Are you lost completely?
I think I was there about 6 hours ago.
Oh, that hurts my feelings.
No, that means it happened before I got here, so it's not.
Oh, you did? Okay. All right,
Save that one.
let's keep it simple. We're starting with our big rectangle. This says divide it into 1/4 and find the southeast fourth, right? So now we're dividing it into 4s. And the southeast 1/4 is right there. Everybody good? All right, so here we are. Now we go to the northwest 1/4. So we're here, so we're gonna divide that into 4s, right? We're staying, because it says out of here. That comma says out of here. So now we're gonna divide it into 1/4. And it said the northwest, so now we're up in here. Right in there. Everybody see? And then it says the north 1/2. The north 1/2 of this. So if it said north 1/2, it means divide horizontally, like Elizabeth said a while ago. So there we are, right there. Now we're starting again, because this person owns more than that. So we start at the southwest 1/4. Well, if we pretend like we're starting all over, we're dividing it into 4s. In the southwest 1/4 right there, right? And then it said the northeast 1/4 of that. And so we divide that into 1/4, and the northeast 1/4 is right here. So that owner owns that and that little sliver over there. Make a little tiny bit of sense?
Is this gonna be on the sale?
What part? You're not gonna have to sketch it,
No.
but they could have a sketch on your test.
They can have a sketch and ask us a question within the sketch.
So I would have an understanding of it. Your question won't be real complicated. We don't use this in North Carolina, but since we've got national kind of questions, we need to know what it means, for that part of the test. How many acres is that?
That's what I was going to say. On your test, there's a question like that, saying such and such owns this, or southeast, northwest, whatever, how many acres do they own?
Ooh,
Yeah.
was that on test two?
That was on your test.
I don't remember that question.
Oh,
You do. All right, let's figure.
I got it right, so keep it. Oh, I know.
Let's figure the math, the acreage. So I'm gonna do it separately because there's an and there. So let's start here, 4 times 4. And how many times does 16 go into there? 40? Alrighty, and then let's say 2 times 4 times 4, and that's 32. And that goes into 640 20 times. So they have 60 acres. Make a little sense? I think this is kind of fun. Maybe it's just because it's late in the night, but I think this is a little fun once you catch on to it. And it might take you a minute to catch on to it, but I think it's kind of cool. Huh?
It's fun now.
It's what?
It's fun now, it wasn't fun at first.
Not fun at first, but after you kind of hear it and get used to it. Well, I guess fun is defined, it's in the eyes of the person, I guess. This is fun to me, but this is my life. This is fun to me. All right, everybody. Let's do this. Let me give you the answers to your quiz from class 2, and then we'll call it a night. Because somebody was asking and reminded me, we did the answers for class 1, but we didn't do the answers for class 2. And so I'm just going to give you the questions, the answers to the multiple choice. So, when you're ready. It's just called quiz, and it's in your class 2 section. 20 questions. So 1 is C. You don't need a license to sell your own property, do you? No. 2 is D, dog. Which of the following is exempt from licensing? Golly, if the court has appointed somebody, you don't need a license, like a guardian or a trustee. An attorney, in fact, everybody's like a power of attorney. When you give someone a power of attorney, it's like they're you. You know, it's like you. You don't need a license. Number 3, D, dog. How old do you have to be to get a license in North Carolina? 18. Number 4 is B, boy. And if you have a name change, if you have an address change, you are to notify the real estate commission in writing within 10 days. Number 5 is A. When can a person begin practicing real estate? Remember we said when you get your license, it is inactive. It has to be activated before you can use it. And who activates it? Broker in charge. They activate your license by sending notice to the real estate commission. And what about number 6? What'd you get there? C. Land, improvement, and all the rights. The rights are the bundle of legal rights. That's the definition of real property. Number 7, what did you get? C. A painting hanging on the wall is personal property, everybody, which would mean it's not a fixture. Number 8, the answer is D, dog, because the use is already established. They want this property to be used for religious purposes, and that means determinable. Number 9 is A. Isn't it? Well, let me look here a minute. Sally owns a house that she will allow her sister Fran to live in for Fran's life. Fran has a life estate, everybody. I mean, it's worded, she's got life rights, is kind of the way it's worded. Upon Fran's death, the house goes to Sally's children. What describes Fran? Fran has an ordinary life estate. When she dies and it goes to the children, that would be called reversion. But they're asking about Fran. Number 10, did you get A? So if you're renting a space from somebody, it's called leasehold or non-freehold. Number 11, what'd you get? C. You own on a river, and when you own backing up to a river, you own to the water's edge or the border of the water. Number 12, B. Ocean front is called littoral. Ocean, guys, waters that have a high and a low tide, that would be under the littoral water rights. Number 13, did you get D-Dog? Some states do the right of prior appropriation, and all that means is first come, first served, and you get to use the water. Number 14, did you get B-Boy? The rights are called the bundle of legal rights. 15, did you get C? Receiving it back after the life ends is called reversion. 16, did you get, what'd you get? C. The answer is C. Now, this discussion will come up a little more involved than this at this minute, but when you go out to look at a property to put it on the market, you should not use the tax records. You should not use another agent's numbers when they had the listing before. The real estate commission says if you're advertising square footage, you need to know how to measure it. Now, it would be okay for you to call an appraiser and say, will you come measure this for me? It would be okay if there was somebody experienced in your office to help you do it, but you shouldn't use other people's numbers. Number 17, what did you get? How about D-Dog? Now, guys, I thought I showed you Appendix C, and it seems like I showed you that, and I said, when you get a chance to look back there, there are 3 criteria in order to be called heated living area. One is it has to be permanently heated. 2 is it has to be completely finished. And 3 is the area you want to include has to be directly accessible from another main finished heated area. So let me tell you what page that is on in case you want to look at it later. It's in your Appendix C, and and that's just a few pages about square footage. And this would be on page 690. So you can make a note to go look at 690. And it's the right-hand paragraph, right-hand column. Alrighty, number 18, B, the rule of the 5s. 5 or more separate periods over at least 5 years. 19, D. Every purchaser of a timeshare is entitled to what? None of those. What did you say, Hunter? You said C?
3-day right of session.
Well, the right of rescission is 5 days, not 3. It's a 5-day right to rescind. And number 20, did you get B-Boy? All right. Good, good, good. Guys, these are probably pretty good little practice quizzes for you that you can keep studying. And if you haven't done number class 3, it'd be good to do it so that you can get the answers tomorrow night for that. And we are going to get that on schedule. All righty, thank you for your attention tonight.